We're going to pass it off to our first speakers here from BlaBlaCar. Thank you.
We need to plug here. Do you have a clicker? Here.
Cool. Wow, now I'm nervous. Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be here, and I'm very happy to see so many people coming here. So, just a quick introduction. I'm Nicolas. This is Dawid. We're both designers at BlaBlaCar, and together we've spent actually pretty much like 3 years working around the subject of a design system.
Yeah, so that's probably why we recently got approached by different companies who are really trying to know how we do design system at BlaBlaCar. And there should a lot of questions at us, like how should we start, like where should we go with it, how can I actually evangelize around the company that it's actually a thing to do, should we do like a strict or loose or modular, and all of these great questions, but we always struggle answering them because these are always different companies. There are different level of maturity of design teams, a different size of the teams, they work on different product, different contexts. So we felt that maybe more interesting would be to actually tell you what is our vision for design system at BlaBlaCar. And for that, Nico will give you a little bit of context as to where we stand today.
Yep, so to give you a little bit of context, I'll go back in time, 3 years ago. So when I arrived at BlaBlaCar, this is what designers were using to build screens. So they had an empty sketch files and 2 fonts for testing. And with no surprise, the result was what we were expecting. So this is, I won't go into details, but this is the actual same page at this moment on different platforms. So you can see that there's different components, different margins, different colors, different architecture. And I remember asking myself, like, how do they manage that? So as a lot of companies, we started working on building our own library that we call the Legos. And so we built this library and we handled it to our designers. So we managed to get to a very visual consistency on our product. But we quickly find out that there was some issues with the fact that we were giving components without any guidelines to them. So if I go back to the metaphor of Legos, if I give to 2 kids the same Legos and ask them to build a boat, you might have different results. So I'm not saying that the one on the left is ugly, but I'm saying that it's maybe messier than the one on the right. So this is pretty much what we had as a finality in our product. And so we decided that we needed to introduce more UX guidelines to our system. So in 2017, BlaBlaCar was starting to rebranding itself. And so we took the opportunity to rebuild our library. And so we knew that we didn't want to only change colors and fonts and just this. So we decided that we needed to add this UX rules to our system. So we started introducing very clear guidelines on how to use each component. We started recognizing UX patterns. So we had templates that they were able to use. We started adding content guidelines. We were explaining stuff like how and when you should use that type of component or the other one. And so we managed to reach a level in which we had, at the same time, visual consistency and also UX consistency in the fact that if you take 2 different moments in the experience of BlaBlaCar, but that are actually pretty similar in the interactions, there is not that many differences between the 2 So with this UX system, we started having a pretty big impact on the design team and even the product team. And we felt that we wanted to spread this thinking on the company level. So we started working on the product system. And when we say product system, we mean things like this tree of decisions. So now if we have a team that wants to, that has discussions around should I send or not an email or a push, there is no discussion. There is a very simple tree of decision to look at, and then you have your answer. We also started, it's very work in progress. So we also started working on the how do we talk about a new feature, depending if it's a newbie user or a very experienced one. So we started working with marketing metrics like this one to really understand what are the different types of users that we have. And we also started working on the emotion part of our system. So kind of trying to really understand when and why we should work with the emotion with our users. So we had ideas like we know that we have to emphasize on the beginning of the journey or on the end or on very positive or very negative moments. And so we have a lot of ideas like this. We want to, it's very easy to find ideas to take the system further. And we're entering a very golden age of design. We have this hundreds of articles around designs, around design system. We're creating meetups like this one. We're sharing knowledge. And with all of that, it's pretty easy to get lost on why we're doing all of these things, actually. So,
yeah, so like to strip things to the very basics, in ideal world, as a designer, what I would love to do is to actually, as soon as I get a great idea, as we get great ideas, we'd like to put them in front of real users and get real feedback, unbiased feedback. In other words, we'd like to just iterate as fast as possible, meaning like build as soon as possible, test as soon as possible, fail as soon as possible. But how is like a designer daily work look like? We have a user who has a problem, and there are many solutions to that problem. There are bad solutions, there are good solutions. Somewhere there is probably a great solution. So how do we, as designers, actually, what do we do to understand the problem and find a solution to it?
So in general, what it looks like is that we start with a discovery phase in which we start looking at data, get users' feedback. We start interacting with people. We create empathy. We meet them, and all of these things. Then at some point, there is the definition phase in which we start defining what is the real problem that we're trying to solve. So we have stuff like user stories, jobs to be done, design principles, a lot of steps like that. Then we enter the development phase in which we start having big brainstorm, we create hypotheses, we start benchmarking a lot, sketching, wireframing, we take our ideas, go out and Gary attest them. And then you have the delivery phase. So this is where you start focusing on pixel perfect, where you start finalizing your design or creating what we call high fidelity prototyping and writing specs, something that we love to do. And then we have the delivery phase, the real one, where we handle our solution to developers that has to develop it, and the QA who has to test it. And then at some point, your solution is getting into the real world, and this is when we start measuring. So we look at numbers, and we look at the user's feedback. And so if we look at that, oh, nice. So if we look at that, we have three different steps. So around here, you start getting ideas. Then somewhere here, it's you start getting great ideas, and this one works. And then somewhere here, this is when really the shit hit the fan. So that's when you really start getting real feedback from actual users. This is when your solution is actually meeting with the real world. And so if we look at these two moments, so the great idea and the real world. Between them, there's this, I would say, boring phases. And when we said earlier that we wanted to iterate faster, we actually meant that we want to close the gap between a great idea and the real feedback.
Yeah, so how all the things we did, like with the design system, helped us move into this direction. When you look at all of this work that has to be done, actually introducing library helped us reduce a lot of time on all of these things, like sketching, wireframing, prototyping, finalizing, also development. Introducing UX system helped us actually reduce the number of iterations we have to do, like vertically inside of these phases of work, and actually let us spend more time on these horizontal iterations, meaning from development to delivery. What we believe are again our product rules will help us do is actually just improve the quality of these iterations. So we feel that this is not bad. We're feedbacking or something. This is not bad. We're pretty happy with what we are doing. We're actually closing this gap between having a great idea and putting it in front of the user. But there is something something that bothers us a lot. I'm sure it bothers you also, is that we have this kind of two delivery phases. There is like a group of highly skilled, creative people who are finishing their job and handing it over to another group of highly skilled, creative people that sit like 15 meters away from you, who are actually building the thing so we can learn if it was worth to build it. And this is how it's all actually set up. Like we have two libraries. There is the real thing, like actual interactive, fully functional components with all their states and all the properties that we can give them. And there is this, boring blueprint that we have and have a lot of text around it describing how it should actually work. And this is not like, we don't like that. And just as you guys, we're also very excited about these ideas of high fidelity prototyping, and there are a lot of tools right now, and it seems like they pop up every day that let you actually deliver something on the highest level possible. And actually, it almost like requires redefining what high fidelity prototyping is. It used to mean like taking your wireframe, putting some design in it, and putting it into some web click-through prototyping service that lets you just move from one page to another. So there is something new in the making. We call it absurd fidelity prototyping. There are tools that allow you to do very fascinating things. We actually at BlaBlaCar experiment a little bit with origami. So maybe that's a good time where we can actually show you what we're doing in terms of our library in origami. How to do that? Thanks, Nico. Whoops. Okay, so I will open. Yeah, I can maybe. So this is a design tool for those of you who don't know, done by product designers on Facebook. It's free to use. It's very powerful. It doesn't differ that much from every tool that we're using. What it led me to do is actually build my components, my design system components inside of it, and actually build components out of components. So what we're building at BlaBlaCar is actually what we call the screen. And when I put the screen, it has all these properties, like where you could put it on, but I don't touch that. The interesting part is this configuration part. What I can do with configuration is actually, Nico, could you actually say, could you put it here like somewhere? Okay, so what I'm doing is actually I'm typing what I want to appear on the screen, and let's say that I need a top bar, I need a title. We call it the voice. It will say that's a nice screen. And let's say I need an illustration. And just after I do that, I made a typo in illustration, I guess. Just as soon as I do that, the screen is actually building itself. There is a typo. You still need to type. And you may say, okay, it's not that cool, like I can do the same thing in Sketch in just as the same amount of time if I have a library. But things become like interesting if you want to actually use components that are like maybe more interactive. What I'm going to put now is like the input field. Did I make the typo again? Input field. Okay, so now I have an input field, and this is interactive component. I can start typing on it. If I connect my phone, I could actually use my iOS keyboard to do that. Another interesting thing about that, I can change the type of this input field to say that it's an input field of the type address. Jesus Christ. And now it's an address input field. So what's interesting about address input fields is when I start typing an address, it will actually do an API calls to Google autocomplete service to give me the search, the actual address results. And also because it's an address component, the screen knows that it has to go to the top to allow the screen to display as many suggestions as possible. Another thing I could do is actually, maybe let's remove that and type trip card. No, I did something wrong again. Well, anyway, that's the demo effect. The idea here is that we're actually connecting with this component to our BlaBlaCar production servers. So we can actually, download the real data, real production data, trip information, and so on. So what I wanted to show you is just a trip that I published earlier today. And let me back to the presentation. So yeah, so when we are talking about high fidelity prototyping, when we are talking about high fidelity prototyping, we're not only talking about like interactivity of components, but also about the realness of the data we're using. We've been doing this, transition from lorem ipsum into actually using real-world data. There are plugins to different design tools that let you actually, download photos or real names and stuff like that. But the next step to that is actually using production data and having such a high-fidelity prototype, putting it in front of the user just as you type whatever you wanted on the screen is actually helping us learn a lot. But there is this problem. There is not a magic publish button yet. There's nothing we can do to actually, go from origami live to the production. We would like to do that, but it's not possible. So we're still ending up with two design systems. One lives in the tool of your choice, another lives on production. But there are exciting times ahead because we're not, reinventing the wheel here. There are companies who are doing it the same. There are design tool companies that are doing some amazing stuff. Like Framer just announced that they're building this Steam store that you can actually import your production components and use them in your design tool. You know that Airbnb, they presented something very impressive, which was this machine learning. It was actually a year ago. And they presented the way of machine learning interpreting a designer, sketching the actual interface, and the machine was actually building an HTML representation of it. So it's nothing really new, but we're trying to find our own way to do that, and we are super happy that we have this opportunity at BlaBlaCar to try to build this kind of stuff and try to explore these new ways when we can actually spend a lot of time being creative and not actually building and speccing the stuff. So we'd like you to join us and to work with us on such things. So I guess thank you.
questions?
Today, are you just designing on origami or still on Sketch or something else design tool?
So we're still designing mainly in Sketch. The idea is to, where we are already built a lot of our components in origami, but there is a huge learning curve to origami. So we're trying to figure out ways that I showed you to like really make it super easy. It's basically our own programming language, you can say. You just try to type whatever you want on the screen and things are just building. So we're still mostly in Sketch, but we hope to, go this direction and just build things. Like as soon as you have ideas, just do that. It works.
Hi, great presentation. Thank you very much. To follow up on that, you said origami is a huge learning curve, and I was wondering, how do you onboard new designers? You've built this complex library with a lot of information to it.
So we're set up at BlaBlaCar that we have a designer working on design system full time. So this is the role of designer working on design system to make all of these things available to other designers. So as much job as you can do to actually make it, easier to use, it's on you. Like I said, we mostly still use Sketch. This is the direction we're taking now. We want to make it super easy to build, fully interactive, as high fidelity as possible prototypes for all the teams to use mainly in their user test. We already learned that it helps us really get high quality learnings from usability testing when we don't have to say to the person, it's just a prototype, please forgive us. You can just give it the real thing and you just play with it, Yeah, I went over your question, I guess. Did I answer it at any point? Good.
How big is your design team?
How is it?
5?
6?
About 10, but we include the research and the content in that team, so we're about 10.
Yeah, we just sit in in the basement. We don't know.
Hi. Do you guys have a dedicated person for the design system?
So, as he was kind of explaining, we actually always decided to only have one person working on the design system. So you don't have to manage a team. So I started, and I handed over the design system to Dawid at some point, but there's only one designer, at least. We have a PM, of course, and a lot of developers, but yes, there's only one designer.
That means you don't have a side project?
No, it's not a side project.
Okay.
It's actually a real project.
Hi. You talked a lot about how you're using these for user testing, but how has it changed your work with devs, with developers? If it has at all.
How this changed the work?
Yeah, how working with high fidelity prototyping, has it changed the way you work with developers?
Well, we don't spec all of the animations, motions, and transitions and stuff like that. We can just show them the prototype. They obviously are free to open the origami prototype. Sometimes we still give them specific instructions around it, but it's basically on the demonstration level. It's just easier also for us to know what we really want, because if something doesn't work when you actually can touch it and see it, you just correct it and improve on it instead of giving specifications what you believe should look like and then realize after it was developed that. So in this way, it helped a lot. We just deliver more quality stuff. Yeah. Okay.